You'll never be anything without a degree. I stood in the doorway of the house I grew up in, suitcase in hand, and an ache in my chest that wouldn't let up. My mom had just been laid to rest 4 days ago, and walking back into this place without her felt like stepping into someone else's memory. The air was still heavy with the smell of her lavender candles. The walls hadn't changed, the same framed photos, the same dusty cross-stitched quotes about hard work and faith. But everything felt colder. Emptier. My dad hadn't said much during the funeral. Not to me, anyway. He shook hands with old neighbors, nodded stiffly to cousins, and sat still during the service. When I tried to speak to him afterward, he just stared ahead like I wasn't even there. Tonight was the first time we were alone in the house. It didn't take long for the silence to crack. College starts in 2 weeks, he said suddenly, without looking at me. He was sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through the local paper, pretending like we were having a normal father-son conversation. I'm not going back, I replied, steady but quiet. I already told you. I dropped out last semester. For good. He folded the paper in half and looked up, jaw clenched. You didn't tell me. You hid it from us while your mother was in the hospital. I didn't want to add to her stress, I said. And I was working. Coding. I've been working, he scoffed. You mean sitting in the garage playing on that damn laptop like it's a toy? The heat in my chest spread up to my neck. I've been building something. A real business. I've already got users. I don't care if you've got 100 users or 1,000. You don't have a degree. You don't have a plan. And now, he said, standing up and slapping the paper onto the table, you don't have a place in this house. I blinked. What? He walked past me toward the living room, voice rising. I worked 37 years in a factory to put food on this table and send you to school. Your mother, she believed in you. And this is how you repay her? Dropping out like it's nothing? Embarrassing this family? I followed him, suitcase still in my hand, heart pounding. I'm not doing nothing. I've been freelancing, I've saved up, and the app one built, it's getting traction. I'm this close to launching a full version. He turned around, eyes sharp. An app. An app, he repeated like it was a curse word. You think you're gonna become a millionaire overnight because you threw together a few buttons on a screen. It's more than that, I said. My voice cracked, but I stood my ground. It connects homeowners with local repair guys. Contractors. It's already helping people get jobs. It matters. To who? He snapped. Because it doesn't matter to me. And I'll tell you what else, nobody in this town is gonna care either. You're a dropout, Jake. You're a quitter. And you'll never be anything without a degree. There it was. That word. Quitter. Like it was tattooed across my forehead. I should have seen it coming. I should have known the second mom was gone, all the support I had left in this house would disappear with her. My dad wasn't just angry, he was ashamed. Of me. Go stay with one of your gamer buddies or whatever you people do, he muttered, walking to the front door. He opened it wide and didn't even look at me. You want to live like a dropout? Then do it somewhere else. I stood there for a long second, frozen. Waiting for him to soften. Waiting for him to say something else. Anything. He didn't. So I walked out. The air was sharp that night. September in Ohio always hits a little earlier than you expect. I tossed my suitcase into the backseat of my beat-up Civic and sat behind the wheel, hands shaking from adrenaline, anger, and something deeper, something hollow. I had no real plan. Just a friend's message from a few months back. If you ever need a place to crash, the old camper's still behind my dad's garage. Bit rough, but it's yours. I drove straight there. Didn't stop. Didn't cry. Just drove. When I pulled into the dusty lot behind the auto shop, the camper looked worse than I remembered. Faded paint, half-flat tires, spider webs around the door. But I didn't care. It had power. It had Wi-Fi nearby. It had a roof. I flicked on the overhead light. It buzzed, flickered, then stayed on. A win. I dropped my bag, sat on the squeaky cushion that doubled as a bed, and pulled out my laptop. The app icon glowed on the desktop. Handlelink. That was the name. Still in beta. Still buggy. But it was mine. I stared at the screen and whispered to myself, if no one believes in this, then I guess I'll just have to believe enough for all of them. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of gasoline and distant clanks of metal. The garage next door was already busy. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since lunch yesterday. I dug through my backpack and found a crumpled granola bar. As I chewed, I opened my messages. A new notification blinked from the app's backend. 10 new user sign-ups overnight. 10. Not hundreds. Not thousands. But 10 real people. Real contractors. One even left feedback. Thanks for building this. Been looking for side gigs ever since work dried up. One sentence. That's all it was. But it felt like a hand reaching through the darkness and pulling me up. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't wasting my time. Still, 10 users didn't pay for food. I stared at the half-crushed granola wrapper on the camper floor and felt the dull ache in my stomach grow sharper. I needed real work, just enough to stay afloat while I pushed Handlelink forward. I grabbed my laptop, threw on a hoodie, and walked the 1.5 miles to the nearest coffee shop. Perk and pour. The bell above the door jingled when I stepped in, and warm air hit my face. It smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans. The place was small, maybe a dozen tables, and had that mix of cozy and chaotic that small towns do well. Behind the counter, a young woman with curly hair tied back under a bandana looked up and gave me a tired but genuine smile. Morning. Just you? Yeah, I said, brushing hair out of my eyes. Small black coffee. To stay. She rang me up. Wi-Fi passwords on the board. Just don't stream anything wild. I nodded, handed over a few crumpled bills, and found a table in the far corner near an outlet. The cord on my charger was fraying, so I had to angle it just right to keep the power flowing. I opened my laptop, connected to the network, and dove back into the code. I spent 4 days in that coffee shop. Every morning, I bought the cheapest thing on the menu, found my spot by the outlet, and coded until my eyes burned. I debugged features, restructured the onboarding page, and sent cold emails to local contractors from fake client accounts, just to test the app's notification system. The barista started to notice. You always work this hard, she asked one afternoon, setting a water cup next to me. I looked up, surprised. Just trying to build something that works. You some kind of programmer? Trying to be. She stuck out her hand. Claire. I make a mean cappuccino and questionable life choices. Jake, I said, shaking it. College dropout. App builder. Broke. She laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd heard in weeks. Well, Jake the broke app builder, you're my favorite customer. You don't ask for oat milk, you don't talk loudly on Zoom, and you always bus your table. That night, I went back to the camper and found a notice pinned to the windshield of my car. Please move vehicle within 48 hours or risk towing. Unauthorized parking. I sighed, crumpling it up. The garage owner must have finally gotten tired of the sight of my Civic sitting there like a junkyard ornament. I messaged Tyler, the friend who'd let me use the camper. He didn't reply. He'd moved states months ago, and the camper had probably slipped off his radar. No other options. I walked back into the garage the next day and found the owner, a stocky guy in his 50s wearing grease-stained overalls and a bull cap that said #1 dad. You the kid in the camper? He asked before I even said hello. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't know I couldn't leave my car there that long. I can move it. He squinted at me. You living in that thing? I paused. Just until I get back on my feet. He sighed, then wiped his hands on a rag. Look, I don't need no trouble, and I can't have squatters. But I ain't heartless. You keep the place clean, don't cause a scene, and fix that car of yours before it leaks anything, then I'll give you another month. After that, no promises. I nodded fast. Thank you. I really appreciate it. He gave me a nod. What are you working on, anyway? A mobile platform. For local service workers. Like plumbers, electricians, handymen. Helps them get jobs faster. He grunted. Here. You're talking my language now. Maybe you can show it to me when it's done. I left that conversation with a strange new feeling, hope. I worked even harder after that. The app's map integration was giving me trouble. Pins would show up in the wrong city. I spent an entire night rewriting that code, fingers numb from cold and concentration. Then came the email. Bug report. The address input keeps crashing the page. I cursed under my breath. Another issue. Another fire to put out. But instead of panicking, I started keeping a log. Every report. Every fix. Every tiny progress. I also began noticing patterns. Users were trying to use the platform for small odd jobs that didn't fit the contractor model. Hanging pictures, mowing lawns, quick appliance repairs. That sparked a small but important pivot in the app structure. I redesigned the main screen to include new categories. Quick fixes. Outdoor help. Same-day requests. It worked. Downloads went from 10 to 32 in 2 days. Then Claire brought me a sandwich without asking. "You've been in that chair for 6 hours," she said. "Eat something before you forget how." I blinked, grateful. "You didn't have to." "It's a leftover," she shrugged. "And I figured if you crash from hunger and faceplant on that laptop, I'd feel weird about it." I smiled, took a bite, and realized it was the first warm food I'd had in 2 days. "Thanks, Claire." "Really?" She leaned against the counter. "You know, my cousin works PR for a local startup. If your app's really taking off, maybe she could help. You ever thought of getting some eyes on it?" I blinked. "Honestly? No. I've just been trying to keep it from falling apart." "Well," she said, pulling out her phone, "maybe it's time someone noticed it's already working." That night, back in the camper, I plugged in my laptop and stared at the dashboard. 42 active users. 23 job requests. 11 connections made. I let out a long, slow breath. My app wasn't just surviving. It was moving. It was small, barely crawling. But it was real. And I wasn't doing this for validation anymore. I was doing it for every contractor who felt invisible. Every dropout who was told they'd never amount to anything. I shut the laptop and lay back on the cushion, listening to the faint buzz of the fluorescent camper light above me. Tomorrow, I'd meet Claire's cousin. But tonight, I finally let myself believe. Maybe I wasn't a mistake. Maybe I was building something that mattered. I lay there staring at the ceiling of the camper, the hum of the old fluorescent bulb filling the silence. I could still taste the mustard from the sandwich Claire gave me, and my stomach, finally full, felt like it hadn't clenched in days. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was running. Not from my dad. Not from college. Not even from myself. But that feeling didn't last long. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of pounding on metal. I sat up so fast I hit my head on the camper ceiling. Outside, the garage owner, Mr. Dalton, was standing with a stern look and a folded newspaper in hand. "You made the front page, kid." My heart skipped. I grabbed the paper from him, hands trembling slightly. It wasn't the front page, but it was page 4. A small piece titled, "Local App Helping Handymen Find Work." Right there, a blurry screenshot of my app and a short blurb about how Handylink was gaining traction among local contractors. "How'd they find me?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Dalton shrugged. "Claire's cousin must have passed it along. Small town. Word spreads." I stood there, silent, the newspaper shaking slightly in my hand. "Don't look so shocked," he added, nodding at the camper. "It's about time someone noticed you were doing more than just taking up space." That article changed everything. Not overnight. But enough. By noon, my inbox was filling up. Local electricians. Painters. Cleaners. Even a mobile pet groomer. They weren't just downloading the app. They were requesting features, sending suggestions, asking if I could add calendar syncing, GPS routing, job bidding. I wasn't ready for all of it, but I took every message seriously. Claire walked up to my table later that day at Perk and Paw, holding her phone up with a grin. "You've got a fan base now," she teased. "Guess I need to start charging for autographs." I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that echoes in your ribs. "You're the reason they found me." She shrugged. "Just helped shine the light. You're the one who built it." I stayed until closing that night, pushing updates to the server until my eyes stung and my fingers cramped. I skipped dinner. I didn't care. Something was waking up inside me. It wasn't pride. Not yet. But it was hope. 2 days later, I got an email that stopped me cold. Subject: Potential Collaboration, Austin Tech Incubator. I blinked. Read it again. And again. They were offering a video call. Said they'd seen the article. Liked what they'd read. Wanted to know more about the tech behind Handlelink. I reread the message, heart racing. Then I reread it again, checking for typos, scams, anything that might scream too good to be true. It wasn't. I set up the Zoom call in the corner of the coffee shop that afternoon. Claire brought me a fresh cup without asking. "You got this," she whispered as she set it down. The call began. There were 3 of them, 2 in hoodies, 1 in a dress shirt. They were casual but sharp, asking direct questions. What stack are you running? How do you handle client verification? Have you had any investors yet? I answered everything. My hands trembled at first, but once I got into the weeds, explaining the back-end logic, the notification system, the layered user roles, I relaxed. By the time the call ended, I was soaked in sweat. 15 minutes later, another email came through. We'd like to offer you $180,000 in seed funding through our early-stage founder program. Details attached. I stared at the screen for nearly a full minute. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. Then I stood up, walked out the door into the cool air, and yelled. Not a scream. Not a shout. Just a pure, desperate burst of joy. Claire ran out after me. What? What happened? They want to fund it, I said, turning to her, grinning like an idiot. Claire, they want to fund it. She threw her arms around me and laughed. I knew it. Later that night, I sat in the camper again, contract open on my screen. I was one signature away from changing everything. But a strange quiet settled over me. I should have been celebrating. But something held me back. I looked around at the cracked window, the lopsided shelf, the dent in the metal wall where I once kicked it in frustration. This tiny, rusted camper had been my rock bottom. But it had also been my launchpad. I thought about my mom. The way she used to knock on the garage door while I was coding, just to bring me a sandwich and a glass of lemonade. She never understood what I was building, but she always believed in me. I pulled out my phone and opened the only picture I had of us. Me at 17, her with her arm around my shoulder, both of us grinning under the sunlight at the county fair. I'm doing it, Mom, I whispered. I'm actually doing it. Then I signed the contract. The next day, I packed up the camper. Mr. Dalton came out while I was tightening the bungee cords on my bags. You leaving town? He asked. Heading to Austin. Gonna meet the team, get things rolling. He nodded, then pulled out a small card from his wallet. If that app of yours ever needs a real mechanic, you let me know. I smiled, took the card, and shook his hand. Deal. Claire met me out front, holding a small paper bag. For the road, she said. PB&J, bag of chips, and one last perk and pour muffin. You'll need it. I looked at her, heart full. You're the reason I made it through this. She shook her head. No, Jake. You're the one who didn't give up. That's all you. As I pulled away from the lot, I checked the mirror one last time. The garage. The camper. The cracked pavement. None of it looked glamorous. None of it ever would. But in that space, I found something no classroom or degree could have ever taught me. Resilience. Purpose. Grit. That rock bottom wasn't the end. It was the very thing that launched me forward. 3 weeks. That's all it had been. Just 21 days since I rolled out of that rusted garage in a wheezing camper with a head full of ideas and a heart barely held together. Now, I was stepping out of a black SUV in front of a sleek downtown office tower, staring up at glass walls that reflected a different sky, one filled with possibility, not pressure. Austin felt alive. Fast-moving. Electric. Even the air had a hum to it, like the city was always whispering, keep going. You're almost there. I took a breath, adjusted the cleanest shirt I owned, and walked into the building. The elevator ride to the 12th floor was quiet. Too quiet. I kept tapping my thumb against my thigh, trying to shake the nerves crawling up my back. Then the doors opened. Inside the startup incubator, everything looked like a scene out of a tech documentary: open desks, glass-walled meeting rooms, and a room full of young developers in hoodies and sneakers, moving like they had caffeine for blood and 10 deadlines to outrun. I didn't belong. At least, that's what I thought. Until one of the staffers looked up and said, "Jake? Handlink, right? We've been waiting for you." He led me through the space, past 3D printers, digital whiteboards, and a group of guys arguing over UI design. I was introduced to the accelerator director, Sarah, who offered me a firm handshake and a cup of cold brew. "Welcome to the grind," she said with a smirk. "Hope you like no sleep and lots of breakthrough moments." The first week was chaos. I was assigned a small desk near the window and a team of 2 interns, Devin and Murray. Both were younger than me, sharper than me, and moved 10 times faster. "Look, the core of Handlink works," Devin said on day 2. "But the interface is clunky. We need smoother onboarding, better color contrast, and an easier profile setup for non-tech folks." I nodded like I understood all of it. I didn't. Not at first. But I stayed late every night learning. Watching. Listening. Googling things I was too embarrassed to ask. Marie handled the branding side: logos, UI mockups, font pairings. "I want the app to feel trustworthy," she said one afternoon. "Like something your dad could use without thinking he'll break it." I almost laughed. My dad wouldn't touch a smartphone if it was on fire. But something about the way she said it stuck. Trust. Simplicity. Usability. I started rebuilding the app piece by piece, keeping the soul but smoothing the rough edges. On day 10, I got a call from a contractor in San Antonio. "Hey man," he said. "Your app saved my crew this week. Found us 3 jobs in one day. We're booked solid for the month." I sat there listening, stunned. He didn't care that I was broke 3 weeks ago. That I lived in a camper. That I had no degree. He just knew the app worked. That was the first night I allowed myself to believe I might actually pull this off. By the end of week 2, I was sleeping on the office couch more than my Airbnb mattress. One night, after a 12-hour sprint to meet a pitch deadline, I stepped outside for air. The city buzzed behind me, but my mind was still back in that camper. I thought about Claire. About the way she handed me that PB&J with a quiet smile, as if she knew the road ahead would be long. I pulled out my phone, opened her contact. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I hit send. "Miss you out here. Hope the shop's still playing Taylor Swift on loop. Tell Dalton I said hey." Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Garage's too quiet without you. Muffins taste worse. Come back soon. But only after you conquer the world." I smiled, pocketed the phone, and went back inside to keep building. Week 3 was all about the pitch. Sarah said it would be 5 minutes. That's it. 5 minutes to convince a room full of potential investors why Handlink mattered. I rehearsed that pitch in my sleep. On the bus. In the shower. Devin gave feedback. Marie changed the slide design 7 times. "You've got a story here," she said. "Don't just show the app. Show you." So I did. I started with where I came from. The garage. The camper. The Wi-Fi leeching coffee shop. I talked about the parents who thought I was a failure. The rejection letters. The long nights. But then I talked about the wins. The handyman in San Antonio. The mechanic in Waco. The single mom cleaning homes to support her kids who found 5 new clients in 2 days. "This app isn't just tech," I said. "It's a lifeline for people who work with their hands and hustle with their hearts. It's their shot at stability. At dignity. At growth." When I stepped off the stage, my palms were sweaty and my chest was tight, but the room was silent in the best way. Then came the claps. A few nods. Sarah met me backstage with a simple, quiet, "You nailed it." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was nervous, but because I was wired with a kind of energy I'd never felt before. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was catching up to the world. I felt like I was building something in it. 3 weeks ago, I was a college dropout with an old laptop and a busted camper. Now, I was a startup founder in downtown Austin, surrounded by brilliant minds who didn't care where I came from. Only where I was headed. The next morning, I opened my laptop, saw 3 new user signups, and another investor inquiry. But instead of diving right into code, I paused. I looked in the mirror. Same eyes. Same nose. Same guy. But the weight was different. I stood taller. My eyes didn't dart away from their own reflection. I was still me. But I was a different man. And this time, I wasn't running from anything. I was finally running toward something. The mirror didn't lie. I was still wearing the same hoodie I'd owned since sophomore year. Still had that one stubborn cowlick on the right side of my hairline. Still had the small scar just under my chin from when I fell off my bike at 12. But my eyes, they looked like they belonged to someone who'd seen something bigger than fear. Bigger than failure. They belonged to someone who'd earned his future. I zipped up my bag, ran my fingers along the edge of the MacBook, my third now, after 2 old ones overheated and died during code sprints, and glanced around the co-working space one last time. My desk, my mug, the whiteboard covered in arrows and post-it notes and caffeine-fueled epiphanies. I left a note taped to the wall. For the next underdog, don't blink. The world's watching. Then I stepped outside into the Austin morning. The ride to the private airstrip was quiet. My fingers tapped against my jeans, not from anxiety this time, but anticipation. For the first time since everything fell apart, I wasn't going away from something. I was heading toward a reckoning I no longer feared. The SUV curved through the gates of the airfield. My jet, yes, my jet, waited at the edge of the tarmac like it knew the moment was bigger than travel. Clean white exterior. Sleek design. My company's logo embossed just above the cabin door. I'd bought it the week before, not out of ego, but as a statement. One final chess move. Not just to show them I'd made it, but to remind myself that rock bottom doesn't bury you. It builds the launch pad. As I boarded, the pilot greeted me with a nod. Morning, Mr. Wells. We're clear for takeoff. Straight shot to Malibu. Should be smooth. Thanks, Liam, I replied, sinking into the leather seat near the window. Let's make it count. The hum of the engines soothed the tension in my chest. I closed my eyes briefly as we lifted off, letting gravity press me into the seat before weightlessness settled in. Beneath us, the world grew smaller. The pain, the judgment, the long nights in a camper, it all compressed into pixels as we climbed. 2 hours into the flight, I opened my laptop, not to code, but to reread the email I had drafted weeks earlier. I never sent it. Subject line, update from your disgrace of a son. My thumb hovered over the send button again. Still not ready. Instead, I opened my notes app and started typing from scratch. Raw. Real. Not a pitch deck or a professional update, just truth. Dad, Mom. You were right about a lot of things. The world isn't kind. The climb is brutal. But you were wrong about me. I didn't need a degree to be something. I needed belief. I found it, outside your walls. In a garage. In a coffee shop. In myself. I stared at the blinking cursor for a while before pressing save and closing the laptop. Some things deserve to be said in person. The plane touched down in Malibu around 2 p.m. The sky was that too perfect kind of blue, so bright it almost made you suspicious of it. The air was warm, a soft breeze stirring the palm trees like they were whispering, "Look who's back." A black SUV waited for me at the base of the stairs. I slid into the backseat, told the driver the address without hesitation, and settled in. As we wound through familiar streets, every turn, every corner pulled old memories out of storage. Bike rides. Soccer practice. The time I ran away at 15 and only made it to the gas station down the block. By the time we reached my parents' driveway, my hands were steady, but my heartbeat had kicked into overdrive. The house stood tall, pristine as ever. Same white shutters. Same manicured lawn. Same iron fence that used to creak when I snuck out past curfew. Nothing had changed. Except me. I didn't knock. I rang the bell and waited. Footsteps. Hesitant. Slower than I remembered. Then the door opened, and there stood my father. He looked like someone had hit pause on a memory. Same stiff stance. Same narrowed eyes. Same immediate frown. Jake. Just my name. No warmth. No anger either. Just, flat. Hey, Dad, I said, keeping my tone even. Mind if I come in? He hesitated, then stepped aside. The house smelled the same, cedarwood and lemon polish. A weird comfort. My mother was in the living room, her eyes widening when she saw me. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I didn't waste time. I'm not here to argue, I said. Or explain. I just wanted to show you something. I placed the MacBook on the coffee table and pulled up a screen. The Handlelink dashboard. Active users. Reviews. Client bookings across 5 states. Investment offers stacked in the inbox. They both stared at it like it was written in code, which, technically, it was. This is the company I built after you threw me out, I said. Calm. Direct. I lived in a camper. Showered at gyms. Built this app using coffee shop Wi-Fi and pure desperation. You told me I was a disgrace. Said I'd never be anything without a degree. I turned the screen toward them. Well, this is what nothing looks like. My mother looked like she might cry. My father? He didn't move. Not a blink. I stood up, picked up the laptop, and stepped back toward the door. I'm not here for validation, I said quietly. I just wanted you to see what belief looks like when it's forged in fire. As I opened the door, my father finally spoke. Voice low. Hoarse. Jake, wait. I paused, but didn't turn around. I didn't know, he said, what you were capable of. I took a breath. Not out of spite. Not out of victory. Just a breath that had waited years to be taken. You didn't want to know, I replied, then stepped into the sunlight. Outside, the breeze carried a different kind of weight now. Not bitterness. Not revenge. Just freedom. I climbed into the SUV, told the driver to head toward the coast. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew this. I came back not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. And as the sun dipped lower on the Malibu horizon, casting gold across the waves, I leaned back, smiled to myself, and whispered the words that had waited so long to be said. I made it. I stood outside the modest gray house I once called home, the evening air hanging heavy with humidity and old memories. The porch light buzzed above the door, casting long shadows on the chipped wooden steps. I hadn't been here since the night my life came crashing down, or started to rise, depending on how you looked at it. I wasn't wearing a designer suit or arriving in a limo. Just jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers with dust on the soles. Nothing flashy. Nothing theatrical. I didn't need fireworks. I had something heavier. The kind of silence that follows years of being called a disappointment. That silence now hung in my chest like armor. I rang the bell. Through the window, I saw movement. My mom peeked through the curtain. I caught her face twist, confusion, then concern. She probably thought I was here to beg for help. Funny how people project their own guilt onto you when they know deep down they were wrong. The door opened slowly. Dad was standing behind her, arms crossed like a statue carved from judgment. Why are you here? My mom asked, her voice clipped. I'm not here for anything, I said. I came to say thank you. Dad let out a sarcastic grunt. Thank you? For what? Throwing you out? Exactly, I said quietly. Mom blinked. You don't have to play games. I'm not. I pulled a folded envelope from my jacket. My hands didn't shake. I was steady, more than I'd ever been in my life. I figured I owed you both a letter. Since you never let me say anything back then. Dad glanced at it like it might explode. We don't need your letter. I'm not asking you to need it. I placed it on the small table beside the door and turned to leave, but Mom stepped forward. Wait, why now? After all this time? I looked at her and didn't blink. Because I've changed. And because you haven't. That struck something. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Dad shifted behind her, jaw tightening like he was biting back 1,000 unsaid things. I used to think I needed your approval to make something of myself, I continued. But it turns out all I needed was for you to let me go." She looked down, finally noticing the small logo on my hoodie. A stylized N, embedded into a circuit board pattern. Her brows furrowed. Recognition flickered. "You've been on the news," she whispered. I nodded. "Yeah. That's me." Dad looked skeptical, but Mom turned pale. "Who created Netverse? That disgrace of a dropout?" Dad scoffed. I almost laughed. "Yeah. That disgrace." They fell silent. I hadn't come to rub it in. I didn't need to. The truth was louder than any insult they'd ever thrown at me. I slept in my car for months. Showers at the gym, coding in coffee shops, I said. Every time I wanted to quit, I heard your voice in my head, "You'll never be anything without a degree." I turned that voice into fuel. My voice didn't shake. But I felt something shift inside me, like the final lock on a door I'd been trying to close for years. I didn't build a company out of spite, I added. I built it because I knew I could. The revenge was just a bonus. I turned and stepped off the porch, but Dad finally spoke. "You think money makes you better than us?" I stopped, but didn't face him. "No. Money doesn't change who I am. It just proves I never needed your version of success." Mom walked onto the porch. Her voice was softer now. "You could have told us." "No," I said, still not turning around. "You could have asked." They stood there, watching me walk back to the street. I didn't expect an apology. Some people never offer one. Not because they aren't sorry, but because admitting they were wrong costs more than they are willing to pay. I reached my car, not a sports car, just a black Ford Escape I'd rented at the airport. Parked beside the curb like I belonged in the neighborhood, like I never left. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. Then I laughed. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't triumph. It was release. It was the laugh of someone who'd finally dropped a weight he didn't know he'd been carrying for years. Later that night, I opened the letter again, the one I had left with them. I had written it days earlier, not knowing if I'd actually hand it over. It read, "Dear Mom and Dad, you once said I was a disgrace. That I'd never be anything without a degree. That college was the only path to worth. You were wrong. But I'm not writing this to prove you wrong. I'm writing this to say thank you, for the pain, the doubt, and the exile. Without it, I might have never found out who I really am. I built something without you. I made it through storms you'll never see. And I forgive you, not because you asked, but because I no longer need your approval to sleep at night. I hope one day, you see that letting go of someone doesn't mean they fall. Sometimes, they fly. Sincerely, your son." I never found out if they read it. But I didn't need to. Because the truth had been spoken, and the silence that followed said more than any reply ever could. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't running away from being called a disgrace. I was walking straight into who I'd become.